Sequels can be tricky. There are a lot of things to look out for when making one. You could lead the story in a bad direction and disappoint the fans. You could innovate and change the gameplay too far from the original and disappoint the fans. You could change things perhaps not enough and disappoint the fans. You could fucking sneeze and disappoint the fans. Jesus, why even make a sequel if you know you're gonna deal with more problems than the first one? I'm a firm believer of, hey, one and done. And yet here I am making a sequel to my first video.
Hey, it's Vegas, and this is your fault. Now, Jak II is my favorite game of the series, and that might come as a surprise to you casual Jak fans because it's infamously known as the hardest and most divisive of the series. So, why would I like it? Before we answer that question, we gotta set the mood a little bit. Yep, that's better. I turned off the lights because Jak II is a tonally darker game than the first.
Let's take a closer look, shall we? Isn't it beautiful? Okay, maybe it's not the most pristine copy, but I had this shit since I was 5. This is the type of thing that I would do with it. Just look at the box art on this thing. This feels like a poster you'd see for a fucking movie. And this is what the disc looks like. But when you flip it over, something big is about to unfold.
They're talking about Jak's dick.
After 2 years in prison, Jak's mad as hell, and he's out for revenge. Travel to the future, alive with revenge. Conflict, revenge. Friendship, revenge. Love, and revenge. Think you're ready? Think again. You will finally know revenge. Can you tell this game is trying too hard?
God, I love it.
You see, Naughty Dog was no stranger to seeing what worked at the time and implementing it in their games. Hell, we saw with Jak and Daxter, they basically took Mario 64, slapped some ears on it, and called it a fucking day. Production of Jak II started almost immediately after the launch of the first game. But then, and this is where it gets crazy to think about, a little game called GTA 3 launched not long after, changing the expectations of video games from then on.
We had already started working on Jak II, and I remember doing a focus group and 2 8-year-olds were in this focus group. And I was like, so what do you think? And they acted like 16-year-olds, like 8-year-olds. Well, the graphics are good, and we really like the gameplay. We like what you're doing and the expansion of the universe. Really, this would be a fantastic game for our little brothers. And you're like, you're 8. What are you playing? Grand Theft Auto.
So, like the idiot from your third period that forgot to do his homework, production of Jak III continued with light inspiration from the GTA franchise, as well as some other popular games of the decade. In other words, they gave Jak a gun. What was once one vehicle relegated to a specific zone became multiple vehicle types able to be driven by the player. The hub world went from village to city, with even small rooms having larger polygon counts than a single level from the first game. And Jak himself got a bit of a glow up as well. He looks like he treats everything Joe Rogan says as the word of God.
Now, I wouldn't blame you if you thought this was a lot to program in one game, especially since it's such a major departure from the first one, and honestly, it's a miracle that it works. And a big part of why it works is because, unlike a sequel that would much rather make money than provide the player with a memorable experience, Jak II works because of its focus on the player, attention to detail, and, of course, its storytelling.
Imagine the story of Jak and Daxter. It's lighthearted, easy to play through, akin to a Saturday morning cartoon. Now inject it with whatever the fuck Michael Bay is smoking and you got Jak II. Now, Jak II takes place in Haven City, about 500 years in the future. Remember that little tease at the end of the first game? Well, that turned out to be a time machine that shot Jak and friends into the future. And upon arriving there, Jak gets captured and tortured by the Baron of the city for 2 years. During that time, Daxter was looking for him. He also created the best extermination service the world has ever seen, but we haven't gotten there yet. When Daxter finally finds Jak, we see that the Baron was experimenting on him with Dark Eco, along with his right-hand man, Errol.
I'll be back later.
Was that sexual? Anyway, since Jak is like a god or something, the Dark Eco doesn't affect him. He just turns into a purple rage monster every now and again, no biggie. So the whole game is about Jak, wanting to... what does he want to do again?
I'm gonna kill Praxis!
Yeah, that's right. Fun fact, this is actually the first line of dialogue Jak says in the series, which basically tells you the tone that they're going for. Naughty Dog weren't bluffing when they said they wanted to GTA-ify the Jak series. Because not only is there more cutscenes in the game, making it more movie-like, it's also double the length of the first game, with actual missions and challenges to do, and oh my god, Jak's his ass!
Kick the Baron's ass.
Dystopian futures are no stranger to video games. We see them used in settings for many titles that want to infuse a more mature tone for their game. Jak II implements this perfectly by still keeping its satirical nature while also having heavy political undertones. You see, after Jak breaks out of prison, he meets Torn and joins resistance group The Underground, who lead the fight against the Baron's fascist grip on the city, which is what all games should be about, let's be real. Along the way, Jak meets tons of colorful characters like overly sexualized girl 3 and 4, this guy from Dune, and a bird named Pecker.
I am Pecker.
What, did you think I was lying? Jak II feigns a childish portrayal while providing a far deeper narrative. In one of the first missions of the game, you're sent to destroy one of the Baron's ammo dumps. It's frankly too hard a mission to be thrown into at the start of the game, but when you get towards the end, it's revealed that the Baron is working with the Metalheads, a race of, I don't know, aliens that you fight throughout the game. When you see this, you're led to believe that Praxis is working with them solely because he's evil. But about halfway through the game, on a mission to spy on the Baron, we see that he's only working with the Metalheads, the real enemy of the game, because he sees it as the only way to protect his city. He secretly has a plan to stab them in the back by collecting an ancient precursor artifact. And then you beat him in a boss fight and he flies away like he's the Green Goblin or something. Like, what the fuck? I mean, the Baron is still a tyrannical dictator that gets what's coming to him in the end, but it's nice to see some nuance in a game made for 8-year-olds that previously were playing a game where you rob and run over civilians for the fun of it. In Jak II, we blow shit up in an effort to shove the Baron's big stick back down his fucking throat. Hell yeah. Granted, I never played GTA, but did it have this level of detail? Okay, so I can annihilate this civilian, but as soon as I give you a little love tap, then you decide it's all-out war? I'm kidding here, but that's by design. You could literally punch a civilian in front of the guard and they don't care because duh, dystopian future. And that's not where the attention to detail stops either. Helped Sig blow up a water tank, it's still there when you return to help Ashlyn. Kick the Baron's ass, he talks directly to you from his propaganda machine. Blow a hole in Mars' tomb, the debris stays there until the end of the game, god damn.
But that's just the story, so what about the gameplay?
Unauthorized use of fortress door. Activating security.
Alright, let's be real here, the two most annoying sounds in the world are... and... Hell, I didn't even beat Jak II until I was in middle school. I wish I was joking. All the controls from the first game return in Jak II. X to jump, square to punch. The only difference is that you can press R1 to shoot and R2 to start Tony Hawk Pro skating around Haven City. Move aside, Tesla, This is the eco-friendly transportation we need. I hope I'm not the only one that's amazed by how good the third-person shooting in this game is. If you don't know, co-founder Andy Gavin is basically the reason Jak and Daxter was playable on the PS2. His variation of Allegro Common Lisp called Goal is the code that makes up the Jak and Daxter games. I just can't imagine how hard it was to reprogram something you worked so hard on to make work for a specific gameplay function into one that lets you do this.
Nice car.
I always loved the jet board in this game. All the levels where you have to use it are pretty well designed. Not to mention the change in music to a more techno version of the level theme whenever you whip it out. The same thing happens when you bring out your gun too. The level theme will change to a more industrial sound. Speaking of guns, Jak gets 4 types of guns to use in this game. The scatter gun, which channels red eco, is good for small crowds of enemies. The blaster, which channels yellow eco, is good for pretty much everything. Vulcan Fury, which channels blue eco, is good for long range. It could also stun enemies. And lastly, the Peacemaker channels dark eco, and I gotta say, you're not gonna use this one much unless you want to take out a group of enemies really fast. You can usually tell what gun a level wants you to use by the ammo type that comes out of a crate. Speaking of levels, Jak II gets a lot of hate due to its difficulty. The missions are unfair and the checkpoints are few and far between, they say. Think about Dark Souls. I know, but it's the quintessential hard game. But why? Simple. Mechanics, learning curve. Mechanics like weapon requirements, limited healing items, all the way to lingering status effects. Learning curve especially is a big part of it. Studying a boss's moveset, learning how to parry, cheeky shit like an enemy hiding behind a wall. Jak II falls under the same category. I see too many people chalk this game up to lack of polish because it came out in 2003, when in reality it just takes some getting used to. If you're having trouble with a level due to enemies, switch to a different gun. Throw out Dark Jak. If you're having trouble with some platforming, take your time, study the level. That being said, fuck the sewer mission. I'm kidding, of course. Sure, this mission will give you trouble, and it sucks to have to restart at the beginning every time you die, but in doing so, I found myself getting more familiar with the enemy placements, and got through it with ease on my 25th time. I honestly miss that about games nowadays. There was no better feeling than beating a Jak II level after it gave me so much trouble as a kid. Even now, Jak II kicks your ass, but not without good reason. Jesus, this really is Stockholm Syndrome. If I had to give one critique though, I'd say the game can feel a bit bloated at times. A handful of missions feel as if they're just padding for runtime, but to be fair, I have the same opinion on the GTA franchise. I feel like if they got rid of some boring missions in favor of adding a little more care into some other mechanics like car controls, then Jak II would be the perfect game. Still my favorite of the series though.
I think what I'm trying to say is, don't forget about Jak II. It gets talked about even less than Jak 1, but does a lot of things better, conveys a much deeper story, and completely abandons its E rating all because GTA 3 was a thing. It goes off the rails tremendously, and the fact that it comes together at all is amazing. There aren't a lot of games like Jak II. At least that's what Robert Downey Jr. told me on my last video. I wish I was kidding.